Right now, the cost of renting a 3-year-old computer chip is actually going up.
Yeah.
Just, think about that for a second. In the entire history of modern technology, old hardware is supposed to become practically worthless the moment something new comes out.
Right. It depreciates.
Exactly. I mean, you buy a laptop, and 3 years later, you're lucky to get a fraction of what you paid for it. But today, we're looking at a financial reality that proves the fundamental laws of technological depreciation are officially broken.
It's an economic anomaly.
Yeah.
It completely shatters how we value silicon.
Yeah.
Because when computing hardware actually appreciates in utility and in price over time, you are no longer dealing with a traditional hardware market. You were dealing with an entirely new asset class.
Welcome to this deep dive. We are looking at a monumental piece of source material today. It's a transcript from a YouTube channel called Earn Moir.
Great show.
Really good stuff. And they cover Nvidia's Q1 fiscal 2027 earnings conference call, which took place on May 20, 2026. And we really need to frame the scale of this for you, the listener, right out of the gate.
Definitely.
Because this is not just a standard quarterly update where some corporation talks about moving a few more widgets or, tweaking a supply chain. This document is essentially a blueprint for the next phase of human and artificial intelligence.
That is the perfect way to contextualize it. The numbers and the strategies that they outline in this transcript, they don't just reflect the growth of one company.
Right.
They represent the architectural foundation of tomorrow's economy, just laid out in cold, hard, quarterly revenue figures.
Our mission today is to unpack how the world's most valuable silicon company is fundamentally rewiring global business. Like, they are moving away from selling individual chips to powering entire AI factories. And they are officially launching what they call the era of agentic AI.
Which is huge.
It's massive. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because you really cannot grasp the technological shift happening here without first understanding the sheer financial gravity of what was reported on this call.
You really can't.
The numbers absolutely shocked the market, and I feel like we need to start there.
Yeah, the financials are, honestly, they're difficult to even wrap your head around, because they completely break historical models of corporate growth, let alone hardware growth.
Yeah.
For this first quarter of fiscal 2027, total revenue hit an astounding $82 billion.
$82 billion. I mean, in a single 3-month period. Let's just put that in perspective for a second. There are massive legacy Fortune 500 companies, household names that have been operating for a century that do not make $82 billion in an entire year.
Exactly. And the growth trajectory is what really staggers analysts here. That $82 billion is up 85% year over year.
Wow.
But more tellingly, it's up 20% sequentially.
From the previous quarter.
Right. That means from Q4 to Q1, they added roughly $13.5 billion in new revenue. They essentially bolted on the equivalent of an entire major tech company's annual revenue in just 90 days.
That is insane.
Sure.
And when you drill down into where that money is coming from, the data center revenue alone made up $75 billion of that $82 billion total.
Yeah, it is the beating heart of the enterprise now.
It really is.
And the cash generation here is equally historic. I mean, they reported a record $49 billion in free cash flow for the quarter.
Free cash flow.
Yeah, which is the lifeblood of corporate agility.
Right.
It's the money left over after operating expenses and capital expenditures.
Right, the actual money in the bank.
Exactly. Because of that massive war chest, they returned $20 billion to shareholders immediately and simultaneously authorized an additional $80 billion share repurchase program.
There was this incredible unscripted moment during the call that I think perfectly captures what it feels like to have that much cash sloshing around.
Oh, the dividend thing.
Yes. The CFO is going through her prepared remarks, right? And she mentions they are increasing the quarterly dividend from 1 cent to 20 cents per share, which is already a huge jump.
Right. Massive.
But later, during the Q&A section, the CEO actually steps in and corrects her on the live microphone.
Yeah.
He essentially says, actually, we meant to say we're increasing it to 25 cents. I think that extra 5 cents would mean a lot to large shareholders.
It's a remarkably rare peek behind the corporate curtain. I mean, when a leadership team can casually bump up a massive dividend payout by 25% on the fly.
Just live on the call.
Just live on the call, yeah. It signals supreme, unshakable confidence in their long-term ability to generate cash.
Totally.
They're quite literally overflowing with capital. But, we have to look past the raw numbers. To grasp why they are generating this wealth, we really need to examine the narrative shift they are establishing.
Right.
Because the leadership is adamant, customers do not buy GPUs anymore.
Right. It feels like they're telling us to stop looking at the light bulb, the individual GPU chip, and start looking at the power plant.
That's a great way to put it.
They aren't selling the bulb, they're selling the AI factory. They're selling the underlying electricity generation for intelligence.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. For decades, the core economic metric of computing was the purchase price of the chip.
Sure.
You bought a server, you placed it in a rack, you depreciated its value over 35 years according to standard GAAP accounting, and, well, that was your operational expense.
Right.
But the argument here is that the metric has entirely fundamentally shifted. The new core metric is the lifetime cost of an AI factory producing intelligence, and the units of that intelligence are tokens.
Tokens. Yeah, he specifically called out metrics like tokens per dollar and tokens per watt.
Yeah.
Can we just pause and explain that?
Sure.
Because I feel like this completely changes how a chief technology officer has to justify their budget.
Absolutely. If you think about intelligence as a manufactured product, the tokens, which are the little chunks of data, syllables, words, or fragments of code that the AI generates, they are the widgets coming off the assembly line.
Okay, the widgets.
Right. The AI factory is the facility doing the manufacturing. So the only mathematics that matter to a hyperscaler like Google or a model builder like OpenAI is how much capital expenditure and how much electrical power does it cost me to generate 1 trillion tokens?
So if they can drive the cost of generating a token down by upgrading the factory becomes infinitely more valuable.
Exactly.
Which brings me back to that wild statistic we started with. During the call, it was noted that the price of renting an older generation H100 chip has actually risen 20% year to date.
Yeah, it's wild.
And the even older generation, the A100s, cloud pricing for those is up nearly 15%.
Yeah.
If the cost of renting these older chips is going up, does that mean the traditional rules of technology depreciation are just breaking forever?
Well, in the context of AI infrastructure, yes. The old rules are completely broken right now. We are conditioned by consumer electronics, right?
Right.
You buy a smartphone, and the second a new model is announced, yours loses half its value because its hardware is fixed and the software demands just get heavier.
Right. It feels sluggish.
Exactly. But AI systems in these massive data centers are operating as appreciating assets. And the reason is the software stack.
The software makes the hardware better.
Yes. The algorithms, the routing frameworks, the compilers, they are constantly being optimized by thousands of engineers globally. So a physical chip sitting in a server rack today is mathematically capable of doing significantly more work.
Wow.
It's producing vastly more tokens per minute than it could 6 months ago. The software is unlocking latent potential in the silicon.
I see.
Therefore, the customers renting that hardware are generating more profitable revenue from it, which drives the rental price up well beyond the traditional depreciable life of the GPU.
So for you listening, why should you care about corporate hardware depreciation, right? Because the entire foundational economics of the internet are shifting under your feet.
Literally.
For the last 20 years, the internet ran on the metric of cost per click or cost per impression.
Yep.
That defined advertising, social media, search, and the entire digital services economy. Now, the bedrock metric of the internet is becoming cost per token.
Exactly.
Every digital interaction you have moving forward, whether it's a dynamic search result, a custom-generated image, an automated customer service resolution, or your software assistant compiling code, it will all be priced and constrained based on this new economic reality.
And because this shift is so all-encompassing, the company realized their traditional way of explaining their business to Wall Street, and the public was completely obsolete.
They outgrew their own definitions.
They really did. They were growing so rapidly, and their customer base was diversifying so wildly that they literally had to redraw the map of their revenue streams to explain what was actually happening.
Right, which is a perfect segue into how they restructure their entire financial reporting. On this call, they introduced a brand new framework.
Yeah, this was a big deal.
They took that massive $75 billion data center revenue block, and they just split it right down the middle into two distinct halves, right? Hyperscale and ACIE.
Yeah, it was a very deliberate and necessary restructuring. Hyperscale accounted for $38 billion this quarter. This category is relatively easy to understand.
It's the big guys.
Right. It includes the massive public cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and the world's largest consumer internet companies like Meta. These are the titans of the industry.
And the future projections for hyperscale are just astronomical. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the call cited analyst forecast projecting that hyperscale capital expenditures, the money these few giant companies spend on physical infrastructure, will hit $1 trillion by 2027.
$1 trillion, and the vast majority of which is being directed toward AI infrastructure.
It's almost hard to picture $1 trillion of servers.
It really is. But while hyperscale's massive, the other half of the pie is what really signals the next phase of the revolution, and that is the ACIE segment.
ACI, which accounted for $37 billion, so almost matching the hyperscalers dollar for dollar.
Yep.
It stands for AI clouds, industrial, and enterprise. Let's break down exactly what that means.
Sure. If we look at the underlying dynamics, you can see a profound tension between these two markets. The hyperscale market is heavily concentrated. You're talking about 5 or 6 colossal companies.
Right.
They have bottomless pockets, armies of the world's best computer scientists, and they know exactly how to architect, build, and cool a multi-gigawatt data center from the ground up.
The CEO even admitted that the go-to-market strategy for hyperscale is the easiest because from a sales perspective, there are only a handful of phone numbers to call.
Exactly. Just call Mark, call Satya. But ACI is the polar opposite. It is wildly, chaotically fragmented. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of individual companies and dozens of sovereign nations.
Huge difference.
Massive. It includes emerging AI-native clouds, like startups building specialized AI data centers that don't do traditional web hosting at all.
Okay.
It includes massive on-premises enterprise data centers for Fortune 500 companies, think banks, healthcare networks, people who cannot, for regulatory reasons, put their data in a public cloud.
Right, the data has to stay in-house.
Exactly. It includes industrial applications like embedding a supercomputer directly inside a semiconductor manufacturing plant where the latency of sending data to the cloud and back is simply unacceptable.
It has to be instant.
It has to be. And crucially, it includes this rapidly growing concept of sovereign AI.
Sovereign AI is fascinating. The transcript noted that sovereign AI revenue increased more than 80% year over year.
Yeah.
They now have AI infrastructure deployed across nearly 40 different countries, representing $50 trillion in global GDP.
Sovereign AI really represents a geopolitical awakening. National governments are realizing that artificial intelligence is no longer just a tech sector tool. It is critical national infrastructure, exactly like the electrical grid or the water supply.
Right.
A nation like France or Japan cannot rely on American hyperscalers to process their citizens' private data, their defense intelligence, or even to train models that understand their specific cultural nuances and dialects.
Oh, they want their own.
So countries across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia are buying massive clusters of compute to build their own localized national AI factories.
Okay, but I have to push back on this strategy, though.
Okay, go for it.
If ACI is so incredibly fragmented, relying on 250,000 different entities, regional banks, auto manufacturers, mid-sized European governments, isn't that a massive vulnerability for a hardware company? Well, a hyperscaler like Microsoft knows exactly how to string together 100,000 GPUs, but a regional hospital network doesn't. So doesn't this immense fragmentation mean a painfully slow, risk-laden rollout where customers buy the chips but fail to actually get them working?
That is exactly the risk that analysts worry about. And it's why the concept of extreme co-design, or what they call the full stack advantage, is the entire linchpin of their strategy.
Extreme co-design.
Yeah, you're entirely right. A regional bank or a sovereign nation's IT department cannot piece together custom silicon, intricate optical networking, and complex liquid cooling systems.
It's too much.
They don't have a team of PhDs in hardware routing. If they try to build it piecemeal, it will fail.
They don't want to become computer engineers. They just want to buy a box that makes their business smart.
Precisely. And this is why this specific company completely dominates the ACIE market. They don't just sell the chip. They build every single technology component of the entire stack.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. They build the GPUs, the specialized CPUs, the optical networking cables, the Ethernet switches, the foundational system software, and the acceleration libraries. They design it as one massive end-to-end system.
Oh, wow.
They physically assemble these supercomputers in their own labs, prove that the entire architecture works flawlessly together, And then, as the CEO described it, they disassemble it so that people could build and buy it in the configuration they want.
That's brilliant.
By doing the extreme co-design upfront, they reduce the deployment risk for those 250,000 companies to near zero. You buy their reference architecture, you plug it in, and it works.
And it's not just the hardware functioning, right? It's the software libraries, too. Because the CEO rattled off this massive suite of acceleration libraries they provide.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned computational lithography, fluid dynamics, particle physics, molecular dynamics. I mean, let's unpack computational lithography for a second, because that blew my mind.
Yeah. It's a perfect example of why the ecosystem is so sticky. Computational lithography is the insanely complex physics and math required to use extreme ultraviolet light to etch microscopic transistor patterns onto silicon wafers.
That sounds incredibly niche and difficult.
It requires massive compute power just to simulate the light waves.
Right, so if you're a chip manufacturer, you don't just want a fast calculator. You want a calculator that already speaks the language of extreme ultraviolet light physics.
Exactly.
By providing these specific software tools for specific industries, they aren't just selling hardware, they are giving these fragmented companies the exact software keys they need to start working immediately.
And that creates an almost insurmountable moat.
Yeah.
Because the massive hyperscalers are desperately trying to build their own custom AI chips to compete.
Sure.
But those custom chips, no matter how fast they are in a vacuum, do not have the decades of specialized, highly tuned software libraries built for every niche industry on Earth.
So connecting this directly back to you, the listener, this ACIE segment is the roadmap for where the AI revolution happens next in your everyday life. Because for the past few years, AI has been something you access through a big tech platform. You visit a website, you use a chatbot, you see a generated image on social media.
It's centralized.
Right. But the explosion of ACI represents the migration of AI away from big tech and directly into your local economy. It's moving into your national infrastructure, into the diagnostic machines at your local clinic, and into the proprietary networks of the enterprise you work for. AI is becoming decentralized.
But that raises the crucial next question. What exactly are all these sovereign nations, industrial giants, and enterprise clouds actually building with all this localized compute? Because the technology has evolved. They aren't just deploying faster chatbots anymore.
No, they are not. And this brings us to what might be the most sci-fi, mind-bending revelation of this entire deep dive. They are building a fundamentally new kind of digital workforce.
It really is sci-fi.
On the call, the CEO explicitly stated that the era of mainstream AI has transitioned. We've officially moved from one-shot inference, where you ask a question and get a single text response, to models capable of deep reasoning. And now we are entering the era of agentic AI.
Agentic AI. This term represents a monumental paradigm shift in human-computer interaction.
Oh, so?
Well, agentic AI implies that the system is no longer a passive oracle just sitting there waiting for your prompt. It is acting autonomously. You give it a high-level goal, and it begins to reason, spinning off multiple sub-agents to break the complex problem down into manageable tasks.
Okay.
And most importantly, these agents are actively using digital tools to accomplish those tasks.
The vision laid out here was staggering in its scope. The CEO stated that in the very near future, there will be billions of AI agents independently using digital tools, opening web browsers, executing Python compilers, running complex engineering simulators like Cadence or Synopsys in the exact same way that human users interact with PCs today.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, consider the current state of the internet. We have roughly 5 billion human users globally.
Right.
We navigate, we click, we read, we type, we compile code. The infrastructure of the internet is built for human speed. What is being forecasted here is an internet populated by billions of non-human, autonomous users doing all of those same interactions, but executing them thousands of times faster, 24 hours a day.
But to actually make that happen, to have an AI that clicks and browses and manages files, the underlying physical architecture of the computer has to change, right?
Yeah, completely.
And this is where the transcript gets incredibly granular about the difference between how an AI thinks versus how an AI acts in the digital world.
Yes, the anatomy of an AI agent is fascinating. The CEO broke it down conceptually. He described an agent as a harness.
A harness.
Right. At the center, you have a core intelligence model. Think of massive frontier models like OpenAI's GPT 5.5 or Anthropic's Claude Opus. But that model is just raw intelligence. It doesn't know how to navigate a computer. So around that core model, you wrap a software harness. For example, OpenAI built Codex as a harness around their core models. Or you might have a system called Hermes wrapped around Claude.
So what exactly is the harness doing while the core model is, thinking?
The harness manages the messy procedural reality of the digital environment. It handles complex orchestration.
Right.
It manages short-term and long-term memory retrieval.
Like checking its own notes.
Exactly. And crucially, it executes the tool usage. If the core intelligence decides, hey, I need to look up current stock prices to solve this problem, the harness is what physically opens the browser, navigates to the financial site, extracts the data, and feeds it back to the core model.
Oh, wow.
If the AI writes code, the harness opens the compiler and tests it.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy because I think it helps. So the GPU, that massive, power-hungry chip we always associate with AI, is essentially the brilliant creative director.
I like that.
It comes up with the grand vision, the reasoning, the high-level thinking.
Yeah.
But an agentic system also needs a ruthlessly efficient, detail-oriented project manager
Yeah.
to actually execute the vision, to make the phone calls, organize the file system, click the buttons, and operate the software.
Yeah.
And in computing terms, that project manager is the CPU.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it highlights a severe compute divide.
Okay.
The brilliant probabilistic thinking or inference happens perfectly on GPUs because GPUs are designed for massive parallel processing, doing thousands of math equations simultaneously.
Right.
But the orchestration, the linear step-by-step input-output, the opening of tools and managing of memory, that requires a completely different type of processing architecture. That is traditional sequential CPU territory.
Which exposes a massive strategic vulnerability for NVIDIA historically. I mean, they make the creative director, they dominate the GPU market.
Yeah.
But the project manager, the CPU, has for decades been the absolute domain of companies like Intel and AMD, running traditional x86 architecture processors.
Exactly. For years, the deployment model was fragmented. You would buy a massive, expensive cluster of GPUs from Nvidia, but you would have to pair it with racks of someone else's CPUs to act as the host processors running the whole system.
Right.
But as we enter this new agentic era, Nvidia realized they were missing half the puzzle. Because of this crucial divide between the thinking GPU and the orchestrating CPU, their ultra-fast AI systems were being severely bottlenecked by traditional legacy CPUs that were never designed for this kind of high-speed autonomous agent orchestration.
So they did what a hyper-aggressive trillion-dollar company does.
Yeah.
They built the project manager themselves.
They did.
They decided to own the entire board. And that pivots us directly into one of the biggest surprises of the call, the introduction of the Vera CPU and their ambition to conquer a brand new $200 billion market.
This was undeniably the most aggressive business expansion announced during the entire briefing. They officially introduced Vera, which is their first standalone CPU, purpose-built from the silicon up specifically for agentic AI orchestration.
And they were very clear about the economics of this. They noted that Vera opens up a brand new $200 billion total addressable market that they have literally never competed in before.
Yeah, zero market share before this.
And they aren't just dipping their toes in the water. They stated they already have visibility into $20 billion in standalone CPU revenue for this year alone.
The technical specifications of Vera explain exactly why this is such an existential threat to the legacy CPU market.
Let's hear them.
Vera is not built on the traditional x86 architecture that Intel and AMD use. It is built on custom ARM cores. And according to the call, it is 1.5 times faster per core, delivers 2 times the performance per watt of electricity, and allows for 4 times the density per server rack compared to those traditional x86 alternatives.
Let's focus on that last metric. 4 times the density. That means in the exact same physical footprint, the exact same server closet,
Right.
you can pack 4 times as many of these digital project managers.
Precisely. In a data center, physical real estate and power constraints are everything. If you can quadruple the compute density, you radically alter the profitability of the building. And they outlined 4 very specific use cases for how Vera will be deployed.
Okay, what are they?
First, it will be tightly paired with their next-generation Rubin GPUs. Every 2 Rubin GPUs will be directly connected to a Vera CPU.
Okay.
Second, Vera will be sold as a standalone CPU purely for managing these swarms of agentic orchestrations. Third, it will be paired with their CX9 networking chip for highly advanced data storage management. And fourth, paired with CX9 for zero-trust security and confidential computing environments.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to challenge the narrative a bit.
Go for it.
When you look at those 4 use cases, It feels like an all-out scorched earth assault on the traditional data center
Yeah.
architecture, taking $20 billion in year one for a market they've never played in. Is this really just them addressing a new AI workload? Or is Vera going to completely cannibalize the traditional CPU giants? Like, is the x86 architecture essentially dead walking?
What's fascinating here is understanding why traditional CPUs fail at this, which the CEO explicitly called out. It marks the death of the dollars per core metric.
Dollars per core.
Yeah, for decades, the cloud computing business model was simple and static. You rented CPU cores. A traditional enterprise application, like a database or a web server, needed a certain number of cores to run, and you paid Amazon or Microsoft by the hour for those cores.
Right, that was the standard.
The x86 architecture is brilliant at running those heavy human speed applications. But AI agents do not rent cores. They don't care about cores. They care about 1 metric tokens per dollar.
Right, an AI agent doesn't need to hold a web server open for an hour. It just wants to execute a million micro tasks. Open a tool, extract data, close the tool as fast as physically possible so it can move to the next subtask.
Exactly. And legacy x86 processors are burdened with decades of complex instruction sets that cause bottlenecks
Right.
when trying to execute millions of rapid, lightweight context switches.
Too much baggage.
Way too much. Vera, built on ARM, strips all that away. It is designed specifically, from the ground up, for token generation economics. It bypasses the legacy bottlenecks. So to answer your question, it is both.
Both new and cannibalizing.
Right. In the short term, this $20 billion is an incremental new workload because running billions of AI agents is a phenomenon that didn't exist 2 years ago.
Sure.
But in the long term, as more and more traditional enterprise software is rewritten to act as agentic AI rather than static code, Vera and architectures like it are absolutely going to cannibalize traditional CPU market share in the data center.
For anyone listening who invests in technology, works in IT, or just cares about the hardware running our world, the entire foundational concept of what a server is made of is being rewritten right in front of us.
Absolutely.
The traditional CPU is no longer the star of the show. It has been demoted to a specialized assistant, the harness, the tool wielder for the GPU.
And Vera isn't entering the market in isolation. It is part of a terrifyingly aggressive product cadence that is leaving competitors gasping for air.
Yeah. The CEO mentioned that their annual product cadence is simply unmatched in the history of silicon. They are entirely replacing their global data center architecture every single year now.
Which brings us to the hardware roadmap itself. We need to talk about Blackwell,
Yeah.
the upcoming Rubin architecture, and the hidden networking moat that actually makes all of this function. Let's start with the present reality, the Blackwell architecture.
Blackwell, specifically the massive GB300 chips and the VL72 system racks, is currently experiencing the fastest ramp-up in the company's history.
Just flying off the shelves.
They are shipping them as fast as the foundries can produce them, and they provided the performance data to explain the frenzy.
Right. They brought up the MLPerf inference results. For those who don't know, MLPerf is essentially the standardized decathlon for AI hardware. And they swept every single benchmark.
Every single one.
But the number that truly stood out was the sheer economics of it. Blackwell delivered a 60% reduction in the cost per token compared to the hardware they were selling just 6 months ago. A 60% drop in the cost of production in 6 months. Let's just contextualize that. Imagine if the cost of refining gasoline dropped 60% in half a year, or the cost of producing steel plummeted that fast.
It would reshape global industry overnight.
Exactly. That is the kind of massive deflationary force Blackwell is exerting on the AI ecosystem. By dropping the cost that drastically, it makes entirely new, highly complex AI models economically viable to run. Models that would have bankrupted a company to operate last year.
But the terrifying thing for their competitors is that they aren't stopping to take a breath. They announced that Vera Rubin, the successor to Blackwell, is launching in Q3 of this year, 2026.
The architectural specifications for Rubin are almost hard to comprehend. It integrates 7 purpose-built chips seamlessly across 5 accelerated server racks.
Wow.
And the performance leap. It promises 35 times higher inference throughput and 10 times greater AI factory revenue generation compared to Blackwell.
35 times higher throughput in a single generational leap. That's absurd. And to demonstrate the sheer scale of deployment, they mentioned Google as an early adopter. Google is custom building these A5X bare metal instances that can support up to 960,000 Rubin GPUs across multiple interconnected sites.
Almost a million GPUs.
Think about that. Almost a million of the most advanced GPUs on Earth acting as a single, synchronized brain.
But this is where we have to look past the silicon. To understand how you can possibly connect a million GPUs together, you have to look at the networking.
Right, the plumbing.
Exactly. You cannot just plug a million ultra-fast chips together with standard copper Ethernet cables. The immense volume of data traffic would cause the entire system to instantly bottleneck and lock up. The GPUs would just sit idle waiting for data.
Which is very expensive.
Very. This networking infrastructure is NVIDIA's true, unassailable moat.
They went deep into the networking in their niche products on the call, right?
Yes. They highlighted Spectrum-X, which is their advanced Ethernet platform, purpose-built specifically to handle the explosive, bursty traffic of AI data centers. Spectrum-X is now larger in revenue than all other Ethernet network peers combined. And their InfiniBand business, which is the ultra-high-speed, low-latency standard for supercomputers, grew 4 times year over year. They also discussed a fascinating, highly specialized niche product called LPX.
Yeah, LPX was interesting. The CEO explained this is a SRAM-based product. Can you quickly break down why SRAM matters compared to normal memory?
Certainly. Most computers use DRAM, or dynamic random access memory, which is cheap and holds a lot of data but is relatively slow.
Right.
SRAM, or static random access memory, is incredibly fast but very expensive and holds less data. LPX is entirely SRAM-based. It's designed for ultra-low latency, high token write premium services.
So what's the catch?
Well, the CEO was very transparent about its limitations. It has low overall throughput and low context processing ability. You wouldn't use it to read a whole book. But if you need a very specific, fast-twitch AI service like high-frequency trading analysis or real-time voice translation where a millisecond delay ruins the experience, LPX provides that premium speed.
If we synthesize all of this, the compute, the memory, the networking, the strategy becomes incredibly clear. By owning the specialized networking like Spectrum-X and InfiniBand, and owning the compute engines with Rubin and Vera, they ensure the data flows through the entire factory without a single bottleneck.
That's the goal.
In an AI factory, the absolute most critical metric is time to first token. When a user asks a question, how many milliseconds does it take for the AI to start generating the answer?
Exactly.
If your million-dollar GPUs are waiting even a fraction of a second for data to arrive over a slow network switch, you are wasting millions of dollars in electricity and capital depreciation. By controlling the whole stack, they guarantee the absolute lowest time to first token.
And this full-stack dominance is exactly why they are completely sweeping the market for frontier models. They highlighted a deep new collaboration with Anthropic, deploying their models natively across AWS, Azure, and CoreWeave.
Right.
They listed off their partner ecosystem: OpenAI, xAI, Meta, Microsoft AI, Perplexity, Cursor. Basically, everyone building intelligence at the absolute frontier of human knowledge is locked into their hardware ecosystem.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
This is the trillion-dollar pushback the market constantly debates.
Yeah.
We just talked about Google building massive bare metal instances of 960,000 Rubin GPUs.
Right.
But Google designs its own custom silicon, the TPU.
Right.
Amazon has its own AI chip called Trainium. Microsoft is building Maya. Aren't these massive hyperscalers just temporarily renting Nvidia hardware to keep their services running until their own in-house custom chips can catch up and replace them?
It is the most important question in tech right now, but the transcript provides the counter-argument that
Yep,
it
right.
is.
Annual release schedule.
It's that brutal annual release schedule that serves as their ultimate defense mechanism. Think about the physics of chip design. If Amazon takes 3 years to design, fabricate, test, and deploy a custom AI chip that finally matches the performance of today's Blackwell.
By the time Amazon installs it, Nvidia is already shipping Rubin.
Exactly. Which we just noted is 35 times faster. The hyperscalers are trapped in a cycle. They have to keep buying NVIDIA's newest hardware, or they risk their core AI models falling a full generation behind their competitors.
And you can't afford that.
No. In the current AI arms race, being a generation behind in model capability means your product is essentially obsolete. You lose the users and you lose the market.
This relentless, unforgiving pace of innovation explains why the AI tools you use every day, the image generators, the coding assistants, the writing tools, are getting exponentially faster and cheaper every few months. It is the result of raw hardware brute force combined with incredibly elegant full-stack software orchestration.
But we need to take a step back because everything we have talked about for the last 40 minutes, the $82 billion in revenue, the fragmented ACIe markets, the Vera CPUs orchestrating billions of digital agents, the million GPU Rubin clusters, all of that incredible technology is physically trapped.
Trapped in the data center.
It is locked inside heavily air-conditioned, incredibly loud, highly secure data centers. It is confined to the digital realm.
Which transitions us to the final and perhaps most impactful piece of the puzzle. What happens when this massive intelligence breaks out of the data center and bleeds into the physical reality we live in?
We enter what the CEO defined as the era of physical AI and the awakening of the $100 trillion economy.
The numbers starting to emerge here are serious. It's no longer just theoretical. The edge computing segment grew to $6.44 billion.
Yep.
But more importantly, true physical AI revenue exceeded $9 billion over the trailing 12 months.
The CEO made a profound historical point on the call. He highlighted that the $100 trillion physical industry, heavy manufacturing, global transportation, logistics, agriculture, has been largely untouched by the digital revolutions of the last 30 years.
That's true.
The internet completely revolutionized communication, media, and retail, but it did not fundamentally change the physics of how a factory stamps steel, or how a cargo ship navigates a storm, or how a surgeon operates. The physical world remains stubbornly analog.
And that is what is about to change.
Exactly.
And he brought the receipts to prove it. They announced a massive global partnership with Uber to act as the intelligence engine for their robotaxi fleet. They are aggressively scaling this to 30 major cities across 4 continents by 2028.
Huge.
Beyond autonomous cars, they are seeing massive expansions in industrial robotics, precision surgical robots, and even humanoid robotic applications.
We need to decode this term, physical AI, because it's often misunderstood. When the average person hears robotics, they picture a mechanical arm on an assembly line blindly welding a car chassis in a pre-programmed loop. But physical AI is fundamentally different. It's not a blind loop. It's a robotic system operating as a personal AI for its specific environment.
How exactly does a complex robotic system act as a personal AI?
Think about the compute architecture at the edge, meaning out in the real world, away from the data center. A self-driving Uber navigating downtown traffic, an autonomous factory floor coordinating 100 moving machines, or even an AI-powered telco base station managing radio frequencies, they are all fundamentally the exact same computing architecture.
Okay.
They're local hubs of extreme intelligence that have to physically perceive the chaotic world around them using sensors, cameras, LiDAR, radar.
Right.
They have to process that massive influx of visual and spatial data locally on the machine itself, because the latency of sending video to a cloud data center and waiting for a response is too slow when a pedestrian steps into the street.
Milliseconds matter.
And then they have to make a physical decision in real time.
Wait, let's go back to an example you just casually threw out there. If an AI-powered telco base station, literally a cell phone tower, is now architecturally considered a robotic system, does that mean our entire definition of what constitutes a robot is changing? Are we moving away from the definition of a machine with moving arms and legs to any machine that physically perceives and reacts to its environment?
This raises an incredibly important question about the future of infrastructure, and the answer is absolutely yes. A cell tower equipped with physical AI is constantly perceiving the invisible physical world.
Wow.
It is analyzing radio frequency interference, weather patterns, and the real-time density of users walking through a city block. It processes that data locally and physically adjusts its signal propagation, power output, and beamforming in real time to optimize coverage.
That's amazing.
It is, by definition, a stationary robot interacting with the physical world. A modern automated factory isn't just a building with robots inside it. The entire building itself is a giant multi-layered robot.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means the environment around you is waking up. Your future car, your local cell tower, the automated factory that machines the parts for your phone, the surgical suite at your local hospital. They're all becoming intelligent, localized endpoints. The AI is stepping off the computer screen. It is no longer just a text box you type queries into. It is becoming an active, perceiving participant in your physical environment.
And this ties back brilliantly to the strategic map we discussed earlier. This is exactly why sovereign AI and those heavily regulated on-premise ACIE data centers are so vital to the future.
Right, the local compute.
When AI hits the physical world, the stakes change completely. Safety, latency, and regulatory compliance become paramount. You cannot have a 2-ton self-driving car or a microscopic surgical robot relying on a cloud server hosted in a different country.
No.
If the internet connection drops for half a second, people die. The compute must be local, it must be legally sovereign to that nation's regulations, and it must be intensely reliable.
It's all connected. It's a masterclass in strategic ecosystem building. The extreme code design allows for the ACI expansion. The ACI expansion enables sovereign AI to exist. And that sovereign AI provides the safe, local infrastructure required for physical AI to finally wake up the $100 trillion global heavy industry.
It is a closed loop of continuous technological acceleration.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the massive journey we just went on. We started with an earth-shattering $82 billion financial quarter that proved the fundamental economics of computing has inverted hardware is appreciating and the internet is moving to a cost-per-token model.
From there, we analyzed the profound pivot towards selling AI factories and the explosion of the fragmented ACI market, demonstrating how local industries and sovereign nations are racing to match the compute power of the hyperscale giants.
We looked at the revolutionary launch of the Vera CPU, built on custom ARM architecture, designed specifically to act as the high-speed project manager for a new era of autonomous tool-wielding agentic AI.
And finally, we examined the relentless hardware roadmap of Blackwell and Rubin, backed by an unassailable networking moat, which provides the necessary compute to push AI out of the data center and into the $100 trillion physical world of autonomous cars and intelligent infrastructure.
You are witnessing a generational infrastructure build-out unlike anything since the electrification of the world or the laying of the global fiber optic network. The rules of computing, the rules of corporate economics, and even the fundamental nature of how digital tools are used are being rewritten right now, quarter by quarter. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, one that wasn't explicitly solved on the call.
Let's hear it.
The CEO envisioned a near future with billions of AI agents independently using tools just like humans do, compiling code, browsing the web, running complex physics simulations. But if these AI agents are essentially acting as autonomous digital workers, spinning off their own sub-agents to solve incredibly complex multi-day problems, what happens when they start utilizing their own budgets?
Right. They will inevitably need to pay for the API calls, the tool subscriptions, and the massive compute tokens they consume to do their jobs.
Exactly. Will the future economy be driven by AI agents negotiating with other AI agents at millisecond speeds to buy processing tokens, routing around network bottlenecks, and creating a vast, high-frequency shadow financial system where human currency is entirely irrelevant and the only thing of value is compute? Think about that. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.